of glory, the King above all kings, who shakes the whole earth with holy thunder and leaves us breathless in awe and wonder, the King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Who brings our chaos back into order, who makes the orphan a son and daughter, the King of glory, the King of glory. Who rules the nations with truth and justice, shines like the sun in all of its brilliance, the King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy, worthy, worthy. Oh, this is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. I count on one thing, the same God that never fails will not fail me now. You won't fail me now in the waiting. The same God who's never left The same God that never fails will not fail me now. You won't fail me now in the waiting. The same God who's never late is working all things out. You're working all things out. Yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will bless your name. Yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy all my days. Yes, I will for all my days. Yes, I will, and I choose to praise, to glorify, glorify the name of all names. And nothing can stand against, and I choose to praise, to glorify, glorify the name of all names. And nothing can stand against, and I choose to praise, to glorify, glorify the name of all names. And nothing can stand against, and I choose to praise, to glorify, glorify the name of all names. And nothing can stand against. Yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will bless your name. Yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy all my days. Yes, I will for all my days. Yes, I will for all my days. Yes, I will.
All right, that was awesome. You guys can be seated, and Roar Kids can go downstairs.
I know you're wondering, where am I supposed to open my Bible to this morning? So it's been a week or two, right? So now we'll pick back up in Acts. I know you've missed it. So we're going to pick back up. But Acts chapter 27, and again, I was laughing as they just sang that last song, and I've told you 100 times, I stay out of the music. I just let them do what they do because I don't know music, and messing with music would be like Jesse trying to mess with my sermon, all right? It just doesn't go well. And so I just sat there and was grinning because of what this message is this morning and kind of where Paul is heading. And so when I was trying to come up with a title and figure out, because, a good sermon has to have a title. You just can't walk up here and go, hey, turn to Acts chapter 27 and let's go. But it has to have a title. So I thought the best title for this one was When Inconveniences Equal Opportunity. Anybody ever been inconvenienced in life? I mean, if you're not raising your hand, you're lying in life, okay? Here's what I can say for certain. I can say this with 100% certainty this morning. No one here likes to wait. No one wakes up in the morning and says, today, I'm just going to wait for things to happen. There's not one of you in here that does that. Nobody. Nobody gets up and says, ooh, I hope today is filled of waiting. If you're saying, ooh, that's me, you're a liar. And what makes waiting even worse is when you're waiting for something that you know is going to happen someday. That waiting period, and I'm not talking about waiting in traffic. We all hate that. Anybody get stuck in traffic Friday night? Wasn't it joyous? Wasn't as you were sitting there with this random snowstorm that came up out of nowhere, as Jesse called it, a snow squall that kind of came out of nowhere, and winds are blowing, and you're just thinking, what happened? And then it never fails. When that happens, every idiot on the road decides that now's the time to drive. Okay? And they're scared to death, and they're going like half a mile an hour, and you're going, if you'll just pull over, we could walk quicker than you're driving. Okay? Traffic was chaos. And I was sitting on Emily Drive just trying to get to Shogun. And I sat on Emily Drive coming up the backside from Walmart going to Shogun, and I sat there for like 20 minutes, it seemed like, sitting, waiting and I was about ready to just pull over, park in Texas Roadhouse, and walk over. But there was this person in front of me that I couldn't get around. His name was Ricky. And I was just in there going, what's wrong with this guy? Who is this? But it was Ricky, so I couldn't yell at him too much. But I'm not talking about just traffic or grocery store lines, and yes, we hate those. I'm talking about something a little deeper. You know, something like a parent will tell their children, sometime in the next 24 months, I'm going to take you to Disney World. And that kid is going, 24 months, that's 1, 2, that's 17 years from now? Okay, 2 years from now, you're taking me to Disney World. That kid probably gets up every morning. Is this today? Is it today? Or maybe you've been dating this guy for 10 years, and he says to you, I promise you, I'm going to pop the question sometime in the next year or so. And you're thinking, you got 6 months, dude. You got 6 months. It's been 10 years. What are you waiting for? Well, you want my honest answer, what he's waiting for? Let's move on past that. It's that moment of when? When is it going to happen? Ever been there? I know it's coming. See, here we are in Acts 27, but in Acts chapter 23, remember, God comes to Paul, and it's been almost 2 years. Why? It's over 2 years. He's been sitting in prison cell, and the Lord stood before him, and he says, have courage, Paul, for as you have testified about me in Jerusalem, so it is necessary for you to testify in Rome. For over 2 years now, God has been telling him, you're going to Rome. Now, if I'm Paul, and I've been sitting in a jail cell for over 2.5 years, and you made me a promise that we're going to Rome, I'm starting to get a little impatient. Okay? And don't look back at me like that, because you would be too. 2 years, God, did you forget I'm here? Do you think maybe Paul got up every morning going, is it today? Is today? Is it finally going to happen? God just told him, you're going to Rome. Sometime in your future, you're going to go to Rome. And Paul's thinking, I can't wait to get there. But he never told him when, and he never told him how. He just, you're going. Like, I would be thinking God forgot about me. Like, I think I'd have to be reminding him, hey, God, yoo-hoo. It's me, Paul. Did you forget about me? I just want to remind you that I'm still here, God, just in case. I don't know where you are, but I just want you to know that I'm still here. You ever felt like that with God? You ever feel like you need to remind God that you're still alive? Hey, God, we're still here. I'm still serving you. I would like to know your answers on this. Would you help a brother out? And God's going, oh, I got you. Don't worry. Okay, what about now? No, not yet. Just wait. I don't want to wait anymore, God. I'm tired of waiting. Maybe that's just my conversations with God. It's almost on a daily basis. Remember, it's been a couple of weeks ago, but when he stood before Felix and Festus and Agrippa, and he was telling all their story that they all kind of agreed with each other, Paul has done nothing wrong to deserve death. He's done nothing wrong to deserve this, but he insisted on going to Caesar. So they can't even release him at this point. He has to go to Rome. This is where we pick up in Acts 27. Acts 27, verse 1. When it was decided that they were to sail to Italy, they handed over Paul and some prisoners to a centurion named Julius of the imperial guard. Remember, after hearing his testimony, they were ready to set him free, but he had to go to Rome, so here comes Julius into the picture. A guy, he was going to be his handler. He was the man responsible to get Paul to Rome. Now, again, I know what you're thinking because I'd be thinking the same thing. In today's time, as we sit here right now, you and I are thinking, Rome, it's not a big deal. I could go get on a plane right now and be in Rome tomorrow. Now, it'd be a long flight. You'd be jet lagged for a couple of days. But it could happen. It's not a big deal. It's easy. It's just like get on a plane and fly over the pond and boom, there we are in Rome. That's like a dream trip to me, by the way. Like, I want to go to Rome too. All right? That's like my bucket list. I want to go to Rome and be able to kind of walk Paul's journey and just to be able, again, that's Matt brain. Okay, sorry. Just throw that in there. Y'all just pray that one day Justin and I will get to Rome. In Paul's day, this trip was anything but easy. By land, it was a 2,500-mile trip. By sea, it was just over 2,000 miles. And Luke tells us here in the next couple of verses that he wasn't alone. Look at verse 2. When he boarded the ship of, Adramyttium, we put to sea, intending to sail to the ports along the coast of Asia. Aristarchus, a Macedonian of Thessalonica, was with us. So, what we know about the ship? We know that Rome wasn't this ship's ultimate destination. This ship's job was to take passengers from port to port along the coast of the Asian province. This ship was likely carrying both passengers and cargo. The first stop of the ship was supposed to be a port called of Sidon, about 70 miles north of Caesarea. Not a big deal, right? 70 miles. Some of you drive that to go to work, okay? 70 miles, not a big deal. Verses 4 and 5. When we put out to sea from there, we sailed along the northern coast of Cyprus because the winds were against us. The high winds changed the ship's route. After sailing through the open sea of Sicilia and Pamphylia, we reached Myra and Lycia. Can't we just name all the cities Myra? Okay, that would be easy. Let's just name them all that. See, when Paul here, when he's being told about the high winds that were against us, he was talking about literal winds. This wasn't a metaphor, okay? This wasn't one of those, ooh, we had trouble coming. These were actual winds on the sea. On the Mediterranean Sea, sailing season begins in May and goes through about September. Once you hit September on the Mediterranean Sea, the waters get a little scary. When you hit October, sailing is considered impossible. And that's true all the way to February in this part of the world. And it's still that way even today. Well, we know from verse 9 that this trip occurred, and we'll get there, at the fast, the Day of Atonement, which means this voyage would have taken place most likely in early October, which we know is bad. And this is when they set their journey. Like, I'm thinking, didn't they know this? Didn't they know the schedule? They knew the wind schedule. Why did they set sail in October? Why didn't they just wait to March, right? Why they got to go now? I mean, he's already been in jail for 2.5 years. Why? You got to send him to Caesar now. What's 6 more months? But they sent him on their way. And this was not a huge cruise ship. Anybody been on a cruise? Anybody been on one? Nobody? Okay, a couple of you. Like, anybody been on a cruise? What took you so long to raise your hand, you bunch of weirdos? Jesse and I got to go on a cruise several years ago. Here's what I learned about a cruise ship. It's massive. Okay? You walk up to that ship going, this thing is huge. And you begin to think, this thing can fit like 75,000 people. I have no idea. But this wasn't a cruise ship, okay? Those cruise ships are meant to withstand the wind. Now, do you feel it? Yes. Can you, like, we were walking down the hallways like this during one of them because one lady on our cruise ship said she'd been on over 65 cruises. And the one we were on was by far the worst weather she'd ever seen. And I'm going, oh, wonderful. This is great. What a great time to go. They were most likely Roman grain ships, okay? Meant to carry grain. Not really humans, but grain. And this is what they put them on. Luke tells us the ship arrived in a place called Myra. Myra was a key city in the day because it was a kind of the hub for all of Rome. Hundreds and thousands of tons of grain were shipped here every single day, and nearly 100% of the boats that traveled to and from Myra were boats just like the one these guys were on. And many times, if there was enough room, passengers would sail on the grain boats during the off season because passenger ships would no longer sail during this time of year. Somebody on the passenger ships knows something. But apparently grain still got to go, right? People, you still got to eat in the winter, right? So somebody has to go. So they sailed to Myra on a grain boat, and once they arrived, Luke tells us that Julius found another ship, more than likely another grain ship, for them to continue selling to Italy. Look at verse 7. Selling slowly for many days with difficulty, we arrived at Myra, that city. Since the wind did not allow us to approach it, we sailed along the south side of Crete, off of Salmon. Yeah, that one. With still more difficulty, we sailed along the coast and came to a place called Fair Havens. Hey, let's call it all Fair Havens. It was called Fair Havens near the city of Lasea. So imagine a grain boat loaded down with up to 1,200 tons of grain. These ships had one large sail, and they were guided by two large paddles on either side of the stern. What does that mean? It means that these ships were designed to carry heavy loads, but they were not designed to sail against the wind. So no matter how hard the sailors tried, they could not keep the boat on its course. There was nothing they could do. They were just at the mercy of the wind. Wherever you want to take me, that's where we're going to go. You ever felt like that? You ever feel like life, you're just like out there, like sailing along, like, well, here I am. Let's just, we're along for the ride. I got no say-so in anything. I'm just here. Luke tells us here that the ship ended up south of the island of Crete. This is not where they wanted to go, in a place called Fair Haven. And once, while they were there, Paul could see the writing on the wall, because here's what I know about Paul. He's not stupid. Okay, Paul's a smart man. And he could see right away, hey, we in trouble, boys. If we couldn't even make it to our destination over here, what makes you think we're going to be able to make it to Rome? This ain't going to happen, boys. So, being the man that he is, because he's Paul, I don't think Paul was ever quiet about much. He decides, I need to tell somebody. Look at verse 10. Paul gave his advice and told them, men, I can see that this voyage is headed toward disaster and heavy loss, not only of the cargo and the ship, but also of our lives. Now, I want you to imagine for just a second, you're Paul. Paul was a tent maker. That's what he did for a living. He was a tent maker. He was a pastor, preacher, evangelist, missionary, not a sailor, a tent maker. And Paul, because he sees the winds, and he goes to the captain of the ship, the guy that this is what he does for a living. He's the captain. And here comes tent maker Paul and says, hey, buddy, I don't think we should continue on this trip. The winds are bad. Now imagine you're now said captain. This is what you do for a living. A tent maker comes to you and says, hey, I think we should just camp out for a little while and try this again in a few months. What are you going to say to him? Are you going to look at him and say, I was just thinking the same. I am so glad a tent maker came to me and told me that we should hold off on this trip. That's probably your reaction, wouldn't it? That would be like me going to Ed and saying, hey, Ed, I'm going to install electricity in this house for you today. Okay? Because I'm the preacher. Exactly. And if he's building your house, you better hope I stick to preaching too. Okay? Because your house is going to blow up very quickly. That's dumb. But here Paul comes to the guy and just says, hey, I got it. You know what else would be dumb? The next time Haley has an exam in her physical therapy world, if she looks at me and says, hey, Matt, you want to take my exam for me? I mean, that makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Because after all, I'm the preacher. I know everything about physical therapy. You know how stupid that would be? But here is Paul saying, hey, Mr. Captain Man, I know that you know your job. I know that this is what you do for a living, but I have an opinion on it if you want to hear it. Don't you love those people? Those people that just have an opinion on everything. Oh, you know them. I mean, after all, when COVID hit, everybody became doctors overnight, right? Every person on Facebook became a doctor. And every 2 to 4 years, every person on Facebook becomes a politician. They know everything. They know it all. And you're going, when did you become so smart, tent maker? But this is what Paul is doing. At this point, it's most likely the beginning of November by now. Paul at least knows this is dangerous time. We probably shouldn't do this. See, I remember there was a time in Tullahoma where tornado sirens were going off and warnings were going off on our phone. And I told Jesse, hey, let's try to go to the church. Let's make it to the church. It's probably safer there than it is at the house. Let's try to make it to the church. And as we're heading to the church, and there's a black clouds and rain and an EF1 tornado flying over the top of our head, Jesse and I are watching trees fall and power lines fall, and Jesse looked at me and says, maybe we should just go back home. But I'm a man. I'm a grown man. I ain't stopping. Ain't no woman gonna tell me what to do. So we keep driving. 2 minutes later, as all the trees are falling, power lines are falling, we have to call a friend of ours that lives like a couple of blocks away and say, hey, can we stop by your house? This is getting a little too dangerous for us. At that moment in time, I did not even want to look over at Jesse because I knew the face that I was going to get. That, I told you we should have went back home face. Every married man in this room knows that look. Okay? It was like, you may not have to be married. You just might be dating someone. You know that look. I didn't even want to look. Paul was saying we probably shouldn't move forward in this storm. It's not going to end well. Look at verse 11 and 12. But the centurion paid attention to the captain and the owner of the ship rather than what Paul had said. Since the harbor was unsuitable to winter down in, the majority decided to set sail from there, hoping somehow to reach Phoenix, a harbor on Crete facing the southwest and northwest, and to winter there. I want you to see something here. These guys were in big trouble. They were in very dangerous situations because of the weather, but really they were in danger because they were in the wrong boat. The boat wasn't suitable for this. The boat wasn't made for this. They were in the wrong boat. The ship they were sailing on wasn't designed to handle the conditions they were in. Can I say that again? Because I don't want you to miss that, because that's deep, all right? That'll just fly right over you, but I don't want you to miss it. Let me say it again. The ship they were sailing on wasn't designed to handle the conditions they were in. I don't know about you, but when I read this story, it reminds me that it's the same warning is true for you and me today. Because stormy weather is coming. For some of you, it's already here. You may be sailing through a storm in your marriage, in your finances. You may have a storm going on with your kids or with your health or with your job. No matter what the storm may be, I want you to hear what I'm about to say to you this morning. You can't get through the storm without God. You can get through the storm, but only if you're on the right boat. You can make it. You cannot weather the storm alone. You must have the right captain. We can't think, I can fix my marriage, I'll just try harder. I can fix my finances, I'll just work harder. We have the tendency to try and navigate the storms of life on our own because we're experts, right? It's my life. I'm the expert in my life. Listen, these sailors were experts. They were professionals. They knew what they were doing. This is what they did every day of their life, and yet they were not prepared to navigate this storm. Paul says, boys, this is going to end badly if we keep moving forward. They were in the wrong boat. The boat they were on wasn't equipped to navigate what they were about to head into. Look at verse 14 through 20. Before long, a fierce wind called a nor'easter rushed down from the island. This was a violent wind that would suddenly appear, blowing it from the northeast. Since the ship was caught unable to head into the wind, we gave way to it and were just driven along. After running under the shelter of a little island called Caudia, we were barely able to get control of the skiff, a small lifeboat, or a dinghy is what they call it in some boats. After hoisting it up, they used ropes and tackle and girded the ship, fearing that they would run around on the Sirtis, there we go, off the coast of Africa. They lowered the drift anchor, and in this way they were driven along because we were being severely battered by the storm. They had been jettisoning the cargo the next day. In order to lessen the load, they started throwing cargo and supplies overboard. On the third day, they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. They used the tackle for fish or for food that would feed the people aboard the ship. For many days, neither sun nor stars appeared, and the severe storm kept raging. Finally, all hope was fading that they would be saved. I think at this point, after 3 or 4 days of being tossed by the seas, I believe every sailor on that boat had that same look that I did in the middle of a tornado. Don't look at Paul. Don't look at Paul. Don't look at him, because Paul's going to be looking over there going, told you, boys. I told you not to keep going, but you didn't want to take my advice. I'm just a tent maker. But instead, Paul did something pretty amazing here in verse 21. Paul then stood up among them, saying, you men should have followed my advice not to sail from Crete and sustain this damage and loss. Now I urge you, take courage, because there will be no loss of any of your lives, but of only the ship. For last night, an angel of God I belonged to and served stood by me and said, don't be afraid, Paul. It is necessary for you to appear before Caesar. And indeed, God has graciously given you all those who are sailing with you. Take courage, boys. God has promised me that I'm going to Rome to see Caesar, and you're all going to make it too. That ought to give you some type of comfort, shouldn't it? You don't think everybody on that boat went, whew. Paul said, God told him, we going to be all right. I don't believe exactly how it went down, do you? Because I bet at that point, everybody on that boat was a Christ follower, don't you? Like when Paul said, God came to me and stood beside me, I believe everybody in that boat said, oh yeah, that's normal. Absolutely not. Don't you think there were still people going, oh, he needs some food. Get that boy something to eat. Now remember, they done thrown stuff overboard. Like they've done everything they can to lighten the load. Nope, this has got to go. They started with 1,200 tons of grain. I don't know how much it ended with, not much. They were throwing it all, get out of here, go. They threw their fishing supplies over. We ain't eating no more, here we go. That's got to go. Look at verse 25. So take courage, men, because I believe God that it will be just the way that it was told to me. But we have to run aground on some island. Well, that'll bless you. God told me we're going to be all right. God said everything's going to be fine. No one's going to die, but you got to run aground. Don't you think everybody in the boat started doing cartwheels at that point and jumping jacks going, woo, we going to run aground. There was a party on the boat. He didn't even tell them what. Some island. Where's some island? I don't know. Out there somewhere. Well, where are we going to go? I don't know. Some island. What if I came to you this morning and I said, you just won an all expenses paid trip to some island. Anybody going to go? Now, some island could be some island on Cheat Lake. It could just be an island. I don't know, some island. Some of you, there's some ponds and little puddle jumpers that are all over Harrison County, right? And there might be an island in the middle of that pond. That's going to be some island. You going to take it? We're going to run aground on some island. Ooh, that screams vacation, doesn't it? Some of you are thinking, ooh, my toes are going to be in the sand on some island. I didn't say it was going to be pretty. Just some island. Look at verse 27. When the 14th night came, we were drifting in the sea. And about midnight, the sailors thought they were approaching land. 14 nights, 2 weeks of storm. Doesn't that sound fun? Anybody sign up for that cruise ship? 2 weeks of storms. And they're getting so discombobulated because now they're thinking, hey, look, that looks like land. It's midnight in the middle of the... How do you know what land looks like in the darkest night? There's got to be getting close to land. Look at verse 29. It says, then fearing we might run aground on the rocks, they dropped 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for daylight to come. I'd have been praying for daylight a long time ago. Okay? But they finally dropped anchor thinking, okay, we got to be getting close. And then he tells us that some guys were praying, other guys were trying to escape the ship. So Paul called another meeting. Look at verse 31. Paul said to the centurion and to the soldiers, unless these men stay in the ship, you cannot be saved. Then the soldiers cut the ropes holding the skiff and let it drop away. Okay, let me make that very simple for you. If one man gets off of this boat, we all dead. No one can survive if one man leaves. Don't you believe there were guys yanking guys back in the boat? Where are you going, fool? Get back over here. And so they cut the lifeboats and sent them on their way. How many of y'all are going to be mad at that? You on a cruise ship, and a fire breaks out on the ship, and one man stands up and says, God came and told me last night that we all going to be fine. Everybody just got to stay on the boat. And the crew says, oh, okay. And they go cut the lifeboats, and there they go drifting away. Y'all going to be happy, aren't you? Y'all going back to your room and taking a nap, aren't you? There they go. They're gone. But can I tell you, that's where faith really meets. It's when there's no other hope. There's nothing left to hold on to. It's just you and God and nothing else. That's where faith creeps in. Like the great theologians for King and Country once said, burn the ships. Burn the ships. There's no going back. We have to set sail and burn it, let it go, and we're done. This is where we are. That's where faith comes in. Luke tells us at dawn, as dawn began to break, Paul stood up and encouraged everyone. Look at verse 34. He reminded them that no one would be harmed because of God's promises to them. You're not going to be harmed. Look at verse 36. They all were encouraged and took food for themselves. And all there were 276 of us on the ship. When they had begun to eat enough, they began to lighten the ship by throwing the grain overboard into the sea. Goes on to say in verse 39, goes on to say, when daylight came, they did not recognize the land, but sighted a bay with a beach. They began to have a little bit of hope. Hey, I can see land. There's a beach. It's not just rugged ground. There's a beach there. We can make it there. This beach to this day is known as St. Paul's Bay. It was a small bay with a small beach located right between two seas. It was in an area that a hull of a ship became stuck, and the waves disintegrated the bottom of this ship until it was completely destroyed. Think about that. Out of all the places that they could have run aground, the ship ended up right here in a perfect spot surrounded by land being protected by the waves. Now, how did that happen? Remember, they had no control of the ship. It was a coincidence that they happened to fall right here. Can I tell you, the sovereign hand of God is always at work. Even when you and I can't see it, even when it makes no sense, even when it hurts, the sovereign hand of God is in control. God put that boat right where he wanted it, in a perfect location. Look at verse 41. That ship remained immovable, and that everyone was able to get off safely. Verse 44 says, the rest were to follow, some on planks and some on debris from the ship. In this way, everyone safely reached the shore. When God makes a promise, he keeps his promise. He told Paul, every single person on this ship will survive. And guess what? Every single person survived. God's promise to you and I is simple. You're going to be saved from the storm. I feel like many of us are maybe there right now. Our boat has been destroyed. The storm has taken its toll, and now we're just floating to the shore on a piece of debris. And we're asking, God, why have you allowed my journey to be so difficult? Why have you allowed me to walk through such challenging circumstances in my life? God, why me? There's been so many storms, so many waves and difficulties along the way. Why me, God? Sometimes what we see as an inconvenience, God sees as an opportunity. We see problems of storms, and He sees potential of the storm. I told the group Wednesday night this, and you guys know my journey over the last couple of weeks and how annoying it has been and the inconvenience that it has been, because everybody wakes up on a Monday and goes, you know what, today is a great day to have a tooth infection. Today is a great day to have 4 golf balls sticking out the side of your jaw. What a great day it is. Everybody loves to wake up on a Wednesday to go see a beautiful man that is a oral surgeon here in town and have him look at you and say, nope, not even going to touch that. Go to Morgantown. Everybody loves to walk into Ruby in the ER and then look at you and go, oh, dear Lord. What is wrong with you? I don't know. That's why I'm here. Fix me. Everybody loves for the doctor in the ER to walk in and look at your face and say, yep, you're here for a couple of days. You're talking about inconvenience. It was a busy week for me. I had to cancel 5 meetings in those 2 days. One of them was our stewardship, our budget team meeting here. I told Ed, I hate meetings so much, I'd rather have a tooth pulled out of my head than go to a budget meeting. It was an inconvenience. I'm laying in a hospital bed on Wednesday night, can't swallow, can't talk, can't do anything. I have a suction thing that I have to suck out my own saliva because I can't swallow it. That sounds wonderful, doesn't it? And I'm laying there in this bed and I'm asking, God, why me? What did I do? Because that's how our brain works, right? I must have done something. God's punishing me for something. What did I do, God? Thursday morning, a team of surgeons walk in and say, we're going to get that tooth. I'm thinking, at this point, take a pocket knife. Just dig it out and get it. I walk in, I can open my mouth like this. That's about as wide as I can get it. A surgeon walks in, it's got he's 6'3", got hands the size of Shaq. And he has to stick his hands in my mouth. And he's prying my mouth open. And my neck was so sore and they couldn't put me to sleep, so I'm just laying there in this chair, gripping it with everything that I have. Those chairs are sturdy, because I promise you, I think I ripped an arm off a couple times. Not my arm, the arm of the chair. My arm, maybe. 8 numbing shots. I didn't feel a thing, but I heard everything. I had PTSD later on that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept hearing that guy playing with my tooth again. But I didn't know that God was setting something up. And I wish He would have done it another way. I would have listened, God. But see, there was a lady, her name was Abby. Abby was my nurse on Wednesday night, and I was miserable on Wednesday night. I got it. I'm getting there. Jesse's like, that's not her name. Don't get ahead of me. I go to do an MRI at 4 a.m. on that Thursday morning, and I hate MRIs. I didn't know that I was claustrophobic, but I am now. I was about to come up out of that machine one way or the other. Either you take me out or I'm coming out, all right? Luckily, they pulled me out because I was fixing to rip that whole machine apart. But anyway, I get back upstairs and I'm telling Abby I couldn't do it. And she says, what kind of music do you like? And I'm like, I don't know. She said, what music calms you? And I said, worship music. She said, oh, you're a believer? And I'm like, yes. She said, me too. And she said, if you have to go do it again, tell them to play worship music. So Abby brings in a little speaker for me. And as I'm laying there the rest of the night, she's playing worship music, playing Elevation and Bethel and all this worship music is playing through the speaker. I slept a little better once that thing got on. That next morning, we had a lady named Rachel. Rachel was the nurse here. Rachel lives right over here in Quietdale. Again, what a coincidence that here a nurse is right here in front of me, is now right here in our town. And we began to talk about church stuff and about this. And she's like, well, where's your church? We told her. She's like, oh, I know where that is. I said, well, do you go to church? She said, no, it's been a while since we've been going. My husband and I have been talking about coming to church and getting back in. I said, well, hey, I know one. And she was like, you know what? You're probably going to see us there eventually when I get a Sunday off. But she said, so you're a believer? Well, yeah. She said, that's great. That's awesome. I said, no, I'm a pastor, but I'm not a believer. Anyway. So all this is going on, and God is, again, orchestrating, and he's setting something up. Because that night, at shift change, another lady walks in my room, and her name's Alexa. And she walks into my room, and she says, hey, Matt, I've been reading some of the notes from the other nurses, and I've been reading their notes and seeing everything that's going on with you. And she was like, man, that sounds like an ordeal. She said, can I see your mouth? Sure. If you want to. By this point, I felt great. Yeah, the tooth is gone. The infection's gone. Look at here it is, baby. Look at it. So she begins to look in the mouth, and she says, here's something I noticed on your chart. Abby and Rachel both said, you're going to love this couple. They're believers. And they're fun. Who can be fun with a tooth? Like, I don't understand. So Alexa says, you're a believer. And I said, yes, ma'am, I am. She said, I just don't know if I believe in all of that. And I said, what keeps you from believing that God is good? And she said, oh, I don't doubt that God is good. What I doubt is the Bible. And I said, well, how do you believe God is good and doubt the Bible? And she says, well, it was written by man. Technically, men wrote it down. But again, a woman who's not a believer, I can't look at her and say, but the Bible was inspired by God and written by man. Because she's going to go, huh? So I have to try to play her game. Okay. Yes, it was written by man. But you have a hard time believing things that were written by man? And she said, yes. I said, huh. So all of your science books that you have to read to get the degree that you got your degree in, who are they written by? And she said, by doctors. And I said, man? Were they men or were they apes? What were they? She said, well, they were man. Well, why do you believe that? She said, because I've seen how they come to practice and how this medicine does this and how this medicine does this. I've seen the proof. And I'm like, what if I've told you I've seen the proof of what God does and what the Bible says? And she said, oh, they're two different things. I said, okay, well, let's take it another way. You're about to hook me up to an antibiotic. She said, yeah, it's that time. I said, I have no idea what's in that antibiotic. No idea what's in that medicine. But I'm going to trust you, the professional. I'm going to trust that you know what's in that antibiotic. You know what that's going to do to my body. I hope you do. If you don't, get out of here. I hope you know what you're doing. I hope you trust it. She said, oh, I trust it. I said, okay, then I'm going to allow you to put it into my body. Because I trust you, that you trust it, that you trust the doctor that told you to do it. The Bible's no different. It's a trust factor. And she said, okay, I begin to see what you're saying. I said, okay, well, let's take it this way. Do you believe that George Washington is real? She said, yeah. I said, why? Because you have a hard time believing books that men wrote. Your history book was written by a man or a woman. Have you ever met George Washington? She said, no. I said, do you know anyone who has ever met George Washington? She said, no. Then how do you know he existed? Because you believe the book that man wrote. But the Bible's creepy because it was written by man? She said, well, if God would just show me a sign and give me proof that he existed. And I went, she said, what are you doing? I said, I'm your sign. I'm the proof that God exists. And she said, how can I know that you're the proof? I said, you got time for me to tell you a story? Let me tell you who I was to tell you who I am. And let me tell you what Jesus did. And we began to walk through the gospel. And she said, I hear you. At least you're making sense. And I said, do you like to read? She said, I love to read. I said, will you read an author? She said, sure. Who is it? I said, his name is Lee Strobel. And I want you to read his book, The Case for Christ. Once you get through it and you love it, read The Case for Faith. Once you get through it and you love it, read The Case for the Resurrection. He's just a reporter that began to do his investigation of who Jesus was. She pulled her phone out and ordered all 3 books right there on Amazon. She ordered all 3 of them right there in the moment. I said, hey, you got an email? She said, yeah. I said, give me your email address. And so she gave me her email address. I sent her a link to our Right Now Media account. And I said, when you log in, I'm going blank on his name, Rick, maybe you remember, but it's the guy who's the investigator, that was the crime scene investigator. And I said, hey, here's the guy. I want you to look him up. And he goes through crime scene. This guy was a crime scene investigator, and he goes through the case for Christ, and he begins to investigate and walk through it. Watch it. There you go, Jay Wallace. So she was going through this, and she, by the way, I got an email from her yesterday. She's already finished the case for Christ. She said, I got questions. I said, I may have the answer. She said, can I just keep this going so I can ask you questions? Absolutely. Ask whatever you want to. And she said, that book has changed my life. She said, because I'm starting to see Jesus in a whole different way. Because I'm seeing it through this eyes. I'm telling you that to say this. Inconvenience equals opportunity. Pray for Alexa. I wish I could tell you. Last night she told me she accepted Christ as her Savior. She ain't there yet. She's closer now than she was 2 weeks ago. Maybe God sent me to Ruby so I'd come face to face with Alexa. Because I promise you this, I never would have seen her otherwise. And I'm not telling you, ooh, let's pat Matt on the back. Ooh, he's so cool. Ooh, Matt is awesome. I just took an opportunity. When an opportunity comes, take it. Here's what I want to promise you. See, that night, I was hurting. I was in pain. But God still laid in an opportunity. And I decided, I'm in the wrong boat. I'm in the wrong boat. See, I'm in the boat of self-pity. And oh, poor, pitiful me. And God, you could have picked anyone. God, you could have gave Brian this pain, not me. But you chose me. So I'm going to get out of my pity boat. And I'm going to step over here in the boat with you. And I'm going to step back and say, God, do whatever you want. Do whatever you want. And in walks Alexa. And I didn't have to start the conversation. She did. I just had to engage. It's easy when they come to you. Well, sort of. I think I kind of went to her too. Can I tell you, through this, God has allowed me to develop a relationship with an oral surgeon right here in our own town? Because that guy texted me throughout the entire week. How you doing? How you feeling? What they tell you? What they decide? He and I have still talked throughout this week. We've built a relationship. We're trying to work out, well, we can go to lunch together. Not this week during Thanksgiving, but the following week, we're trying to work out a time where we can go to lunch together. We've developed a friendship. Guess what I'm going to do? I'm not going to let him meet Jesse. I don't know where this man's faith is, but guess what I'm going to share? Take opportunity. These men were in the wrong boat. The boat wasn't ready for this. Can I tell you this? And this is where we're done. Every boat that Jesus is in is the right boat. Every boat that God is in is the right boat because it is set and it is ready and it can tackle any storm that comes your way. And I will promise you, storms are coming your way. And you cannot navigate the storm without God in your boat. What He has promised, He will do. He promised every person on this boat will survive. And not one life was lost. 276 people. You would think one of them would have died. But not a one. Because God is good. We're going to play a song here, and I don't know where you are. I don't know what boat you're in. I don't know whose boat you're in. I don't know who's in your boat. And I don't know what storm you're in. But there's a song here we're going to play. She is, if there is a godmother of gospel music, it's CeCe Winans. She's incredible. The lady could stand up here in a platform and sing me the phone book, and I could worship Jesus. But she's singing this song, and she wrote this song called Believe For It. There's so much that God can do in and through you. You just believe that He is who He said He is. As this song plays, the altar's open. You can come and pray and ask God, God, I've kicked you out of my boat a long time ago, but I need to get back in. I need you back in my boat. I don't know what storm you're going through, but God is bigger than any storm that you're in right now. If you're not in one, just wait, it's coming. That's good news. But as long as God is there, you're in good hands. Maybe you need to come and just pray. So here's what we're going to do. If you want to come and pray by yourself and just be alone, that's fine. Come this side. If you want to come and pray and you want somebody to pray with you and over you, come over here on this side and somebody will join you. But whatever God is telling you to do, storms are coming, man.